Welcome to What Kind of Asian Are You? A podcast featuring conversations about being Asian. We are going to highlight, amplify, and validate Asian voices through deep conversations with those in the diaspora making a difference and being their best selves. I'm your host, Kyle. So welcome to another episode of What Kind of Asian Are You podcast. I am your host, Kyle, and today we have a special guest, and I'm very excited to talk to this individual because he's been on my radar for a very long time, and he's in the circle of people that I really appreciate, aspire to be, and motivated by. And without further ado, this is Ravi. And Ravi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you, Kyle?
I'm doing great. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now, and
Same.
it's really nice to talk to you and learn more about you and share with the audience about your life, your story, and what you've been up to in terms of being creative, being a business owner, and all that fun stuff. So I talk a little bit about who you are, what you're about, but I want to have the audience know more about who you are, what you're about, your passion, and what really makes you move in terms of all the things that you do. So can you just let them know? And most importantly, with the podcast, what kind of Asian are you?
Yeah. Let's start off with that. So the kind of Asian I am is I am an Indian American. My family's from Gujarat, which is a state in India, but I was born and brought up here in the United States in Houston, Texas. So a little bit about me. So my name is Ravi. I'm a Houston-based mix engineer, and mix engineering is basically like audio post-production. That's what I work in. A little bit about my background. I was a band geek growing up. I played the French horn for 9 years. I think my first instrument was piano and guitar, but I played the French horn in the school band for 9 years, all the way through freshman year of college. I went to Texas A&M University to study petroleum engineering, so nothing related to the creative fields, right? And I graduated undergrad, finished that in 2018, went to go work for the energy industry directly out of college, worked there for 3 years, and I quit in June of 2021 to pursue music and audio full time. And so that kind of, I'm sure we'll dive into this more, but that kind of dives into, or goes into rather, Ravi Ray Audio, which is the business that I launched at the top of this year in 2022 rather. And it's an online audio post-production company that's focused on basically taking the work that artists, podcasts, film, television, that type of stuff put out and upgrading it to basically broadcast quality.
That's awesome and a great introduction. And what a trajectory of where you started to where you are now. And it's very fascinating given your background being Indian American from, the stereotypical, you study the thing that I'm sure your parents were very happy and proud of you doing until you get in the job in the energy industry, which is really stable, really safe, and all that stuff that, parents love, Asian parents love.
Yeah.
To you then deciding to be like, oh, wait, I want to do something else and jumping into, the creative industry, into like being an entrepreneur, all the stuff that Asian parents wouldn't have expected, especially when you already locked in yourself to like, something that could were very much you doing for the rest of your life to retirement, getting pension and all that stuff. So
Totally.
I want to talk about all that stuff, but to start off, like you mentioned, you took the path of like, doing engineering and all that stuff, being academic, and what was it like your whole focus, your whole life, or like, of course, like you mentioned you were a banker. Was that where you did both at the same time, or like something was like more prominent than the other as you were growing up?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's absolutely a great question. So music was definitely like a passion of mine, but it was always, in the line of what you said, like a side hobby or just like a side passion, right? The path had always been very traditional, like you had said. The standard path was just to go to school, become a doctor, lawyer, engineer, make sure during the early years of school you get really good grades and you just focus on your studies. And then music is just a side thing to stimulate your brain, just something for fun on the side. And that's the way it was for the majority of my life. I mean, there were like music theory classes in my high school, but I didn't take them. Little did I know I would have loved to take them, right? And to kind of boil a long story down into a few sentences, I put it to the side. I put music completely to the side after freshman year of college, just because the obligations of an engineering degree became so difficult and so demanding that I just didn't have time to continue pursuing music. And it just naturally like found its resurgence later on in life, because senior year I had a little bit lighter of a schedule than I had previously. And so it was that time where I downloaded my Pro Tools software for the very first time, which is basically just like an audio post production software, right? I downloaded that for the first time, just started messing around on recording, guitar covers and vocals and stuff like that. And post college, like I just started to lean into it a little bit more and more. And I realized, especially like once I had hit the finish line, right? Because that's what people or that's what your parents kind of hype it up as, is like, oh, the goal is like once you get out of school, you got your degree, you've got a good job, that's it, you've made it. That's the finish line. I got to that quote unquote finish line and I was like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do for the next 30 years. And I just felt a very big lack of fulfillment. And it eventually got to the point of I would much rather make less and love what I do and really be building something that's my own, versus just following the stable traditional path and living that kind of mundane, boring lifestyle, living for the weekend type lifestyle the rest of my life.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from people that I've talked to on the podcast, where it's like, oh, they were really like focused on academics growing up. They did like, oh,
Mm-hmm,
full
mm-hmm,
scholarship, finished with a degree, then got landed a good job or about to go to med school and all that fun stuff that they thought they
mm-hmm,
made
mm-hmm,
it, but it still didn't fulfill them. So I always like to ask this, or like try to figure out, like, in terms of when you say, oh, it doesn't fulfill you, like what
mm-hmm,
your kind of path I laid out for you, like, oh, that engineering job is set, it's
mm-hmm,
very stable, good salary for sure, kind of thing.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You don't have to worry too much about anything else, but just do your job, you'll get paid, and so be it. And you could always do like music on the side. What was it
mm-hmm,
that made you be like, oh, why can't I just quit my like engineering job and do it full time? Can't you just like be like, oh, I do my engineering job, but just dabble in music? Why was it such a big thing for you to be like, I want to do music
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
fully?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because one thing I'd forgotten to mention was the fact that it's obviously not for everybody. I mean, like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking the traditional route and feeling fulfilled out of that. Or, like, even if you don't perhaps feel fulfillment from your day job, to enjoy your side hobbies and just have that lifestyle, right? I think there's like, if that's something that makes you happy, if that's a lifestyle that makes you happy, that's totally okay. It was just like the realization for me was that I would rather be like, I like having something to work towards and to build towards. And, I think, to answer your question, the career progression of where I was at was basically just continuing to either become a technical expert in petroleum engineering or to go into management, right? And those goals just didn't appeal to me. The longer and longer I thought about it, the longer I was at the company that I was with, I just realized for myself, I was like, this isn't a goal that gets me to wake up in the morning. It's not something that I want to spend all of my hours outside of work doing. It's not something that, and you can tell the difference. Like, I had corporate peers, like people who worked with me in the oil industry, that truly did have a passion for that stuff. Like the type of person who like gets up every morning, and you can see it in their demeanor, versus the type of person who just wakes up, shows up for the paycheck, and then goes home. There's a difference in the way those types of people work, because the former, the ones who are really passionate about what they do, can work for hours on end. They don't seem exhausted. They have a passion for really going beyond what's required of them. And you can see that in the work that they do. And so I observed that and I was like, dang, I have that fire in me, but it's not for petroleum engineering. And so, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's so great that you were so self-aware about like where you
Yeah.
stand in terms of like what type of person you are in terms of like the job that you're doing. Like, are you the one that are really passionate about like, oh, the oil industry, or you're the one that's collecting paycheck? I feel like you're, with the
Mm-hmm.
drive and all the stuff you put in, or how you present yourself, I feel like you fall more into the middle, what do you
Yeah,
say? Or
yeah.
is yeah, euphoria middle, yeah, you can do it, but it's just you know that it's not gonna be sustainable, or you're gonna burn out somehow, that you gotta find some other way to like be less
Mhm.
burnout. And but then you get back to it every time you like do a certain level of that work, then you go back to burnout again. Like, and
Yeah.
for a lot of people it's not sustainable for the rest of their life. And your story is really interesting to me because you are like, oh yeah, I can see I'm not happy doing what I'm doing currently. And
Mhm.
um, then you decide, oh, I want to lean into, pursuing something else. But why was it specifically like uh, music, turning your passion music into a career? Because I don't think that's what you had in mind all the time you were doing music. You were just doing it for fun for most part, or you liked doing it.
Mhm.
But how did it translate into like, oh, if I need a career, I don't want to do engineering anymore. What else can I do that can provide me with like money and all that stuff, but also I enjoy
Mhm.
doing it? Like, how was that like, or how did it start?
Yeah, great question. So, basically, when I downloaded Pro Tools for the first time, around that same time, I had linked up with a friend. I just moved back to Houston to start that job, and I decided, I was like, oh, I'm going to take guitar lessons. And so I looked up a local music school, and there was a guy who was the same age as me. He was also Asian, and he was teaching guitar lessons. He had gone to the Berklee College of Music up in Boston. And I was like, oh, I want to learn from this guy. And so I started taking lessons with him, and he basically kind of introduced me to the behind the scenes world of music. Because, of course, there's the front facing stuff that you hear on Spotify, that you see at concerts, the artist who's writing music and who's singing and performing and stuff like that, right? But little did I know, I mean, like, take a Cardi B track, for example. I mean, really any track you hear on the radio. Like, the person who sings, the artist who is on that record is not the one who does all the stuff to bring that record to life, to bring that concert to life, right? There's so many people behind it. And so in these interactions that I was having with this guitar teacher, I mean, they started, of course, as actual guitar lessons, but we found ourselves using those 30-minute periods to instead just talk about the world of music production and music post-production and everything that surrounds the actual creation of the song itself. And so that being said, for myself, I was like, you know what? Like, let me try and explore this from a perspective that's not just performance. And I kind of dipped my feet in everything. So I wrote a song, I put it out, I learned about music marketing, I learned about how to distribute a song, how to write lyrics, all of that stuff. And then I tried my hand at the post production world. I had hit up a friend who runs another podcast called The Desi Condition. And I just sent her a DM one day. I was like, hey, can I practice mixing your podcast? I'm trying to get into this world of music and just explore, right? And so I mixed a couple of podcast episodes for her. And then throughout all of these like small experiences, all of these occurred while I was still working my day job, right? I started to understand better for myself which part of the industry I could create a career in and that I enjoyed the most. And I think it's kind of poetic because it comes back to the engineering background that I have, right? So I eventually landed in audio post-production. And I think what's really beautiful about that career, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more, but it allows you to use both of like the sides of your brain. You've got the left side of your brain, which is like super analytical and engineering minded. And that was a part of my brain that like had already been developed. But then on the right side of my brain, I've got this like really creative intuition, and I've got this like, you know, fervor for creating music and creating art. And mix engineering, the post-production life, lets you take both of those things and put them together in one place, because post-production isn't just technical stuff. Like you do impart a bit of creativity, and we'll get into that as well. But yeah, I mean, for myself, I dipped my feet in all the different things, and I figured post-production allows me to still be creative, still use both parts of my brain, and it helps me, or allows me rather, to help artists and other creatives be their best and take their creative ideas and put them out into the world.
Wow, that I feel like your whole kind of journey from being in engineering to you now dabbling in like post production for audio and all that stuff to your business is very formulated, very calculated, and like
Mm-hmm.
just where it's a lot of like what you have learned from being in engineering. So did that help in kind of easing the minds of your parents as you kind of transition to a different career that they probably had no
Hmm.
idea what it's about, or they have really preconceived or negative kind of stereotypes around like, oh, being in the arts industry or being in the music industry, or it
Hmm.
was where like it was chaos, like, oh, they didn't understand, they were like, why, you could just go into doing more schooling rather than embark on this kind of venture, right?
Exactly. I mean, I think that's the perfect story to highlight in this type of a podcast, right? And I'm glad that you've made a space for these types of stories. It was basically to a T what you just described. Like, I mean, my basically once I had hit the quote unquote finish line, my parents, kind of breathed out and they're like, all right, my job is done. We've helped take care of him all the way through college, and now he's got his own career and he's safe and stable and this and that. And then whenever I started to bring up the stuff about chasing music and going back to school and stuff like that, and they're like, man, I mean, like quite literally, my dad had told me, he was like, man, now I have to worry again. And that's one of those things that's like really hard to hear, but at the same time, it's also, I find it incredibly motivating as well, because you know, where it all comes from is just a place of love. All Asian parents really want to see is just you be happy and safe and succeed, right? And so, one of the things that I tried to do throughout this whole process is, of course, I keep them informed. I tell them this is my plan, this is where I'm going into. Audio post production also is. It's a lot more closer to that stable picture, because it's not like there's an extreme level of risk that's associated with being an artist. Not that people shouldn't chase that dream, but being in post production, you're not consigned to just like one story. You can help other people create their other stories, right? And it's not contingent upon the success of one song. You're working on so many different things for so many different people. So there's a level of stability that comes with that. And anyways, to bring it back to the parent topic, yeah, I mean, I just try to keep them informed through the whole way. When it comes to finances, I'm doing everything absolutely on my own. That 3 years working for the energy industry helped me build savings. And I'm currently a student at the Berklee College of Music through their online program. All of that tuition is being paid by me. All business expenses are being paid by me. And the whole point of me sharing that is that, like, I'm trying to day by day, like, show my parents that I am okay, I'm stable, that they don't need to worry about me, that I'm creating success. And then I think that the last piece of that is sharing wins, right? Every time I get like a new really big client, or like perhaps I have a really exciting project, I'll share it with them. And little by little, they're starting to understand, like, dang, this thing is actually kind of headed somewhere. And it's a constant struggle. Like, the solution isn't there yet, and of course things like this take time, but I think we're in the right direction. I think we're in the right direction.
Sorry to interrupt the podcast, but if this is a podcast that is bigger, this would be the time where we would be selling an ad for either a pillow, a subscription box, or online therapy, but we're not there yet. However, if businesses want us to do an ad for them, we are more than happy to do so. Just reach out to us. In the meantime, this is our time to say that you, the listeners, mean a lot to us. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can do that by listening, commenting, liking, and subscribing to the podcast on all social media platforms, as well as giving us a rating and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We are at What Kind of Asian Pod on Instagram, and just search What Kind of Asian Are You podcast for everything else. And if you have $1 or $2 to spare, buy me a coffee. Links in show notes. Now back to the episode. Yeah, that's great. I love how, like, a lot of times when we hear these kind of stories, like a lot of like the kid that wants to pursue the creatives
Mm-hmm.
and their parents' relationship, they're like, oh yeah, my parents don't like this or whatever, they don't see the vision. So then
Mm-hmm.
what they would do would be like, I'm just gonna do it first and then worry about everything else later. But for you, you kind of have them looped in every step of the way, so that,
Yeah.
one, lets them know like you have a plan, you're doing what you need to do. And
Mm-hmm.
even though they might not understand 100%, at least they have a framework of like where you're going or how you're hoping to succeed. And that's great. But you mentioned like sharing your wins. Is it really
Mm-hmm.
hard for you to be like, sharing wins to your parents, because a lot of time when you share your wins, it might not necessarily be like monetary things, that which is a big
Yeah.
indicator for Asian parents, like, oh, you're doing fine, these are
Mm-hmm.
big wins. But for you, in terms of being creative, being like, getting clients, it might be like, yeah, there's still monetary value attached to it, but a lot of times it's about networking, being able to work with
Mm-hmm.
certain people. Those are still wins for sure. So how do you kind
Yeah.
of like navigate that? Because I assume like they'd be like, oh, you got this win, but does it pay you? Or like, what monetary thing are there for you? And you say, oh, well, there is, but also at the same time, the value is more
Yeah.
on other, no, less monetary things.
Yeah, no, I that's so funny you mentioned that because literally this happened like 2 days ago. We were at the dinner table and I told them about a win that was strictly a connection. And so basically what I try to explain them about this, and they understand this, like when it comes to business and entrepreneurship, things like this are kind of like a picture, and for the people listening, picture like a exponential graph, right? Like, so the first part of it is very, very flat, meaning that the first, like, I don't know, 3 to 10 years even of a business, like you're not going to see a lot of growth. You're going to basically putting out your creative works or whatever it is that you're doing out into the world to no sales or to no views and stuff like that. But along the way, you'll meet connections. Along the way, you'll get projects. Along the way, you'll get experience and knowledge that will kind of start to push that curve a little bit higher and higher. And eventually, I think towards, that, 5 to 10 year, 5 to 15 year mark, you'll start to see it finally take off. And so the point that I'm getting at is the fact that like the first 5 years or something like that, like you're not going to see a return. You're not going to make profit. So it's all about the connections. And so to bring it back to your question, I'm sure they think about that, but they've gotten to a point, my parents, they've gotten to a point where they don't really ask about the monetary contributions. They're pretty happy to hear about the connections as well. And so the way I described this one connection that I was telling them about just a couple days ago was like these two people that I had interfaced with are door openers. They've worked with really, really big names in the industry. They're based out of LA. They're incredibly kind. They like my work and they're bringing me more projects. And I told them, I was like, I'm just going to keep going at this thing. And they were happy to hear that. They were really happy to hear that. No questions about the monetary side of things. Cause again, I mean, like I have not asked them for a dime throughout all of this stuff. And I think they never say it explicitly, but they get like a sense of, I think he's okay.
Yeah, I like to make a joke like, if you're able to like not ask them for a dime, then they'll allow you to do anything pretty much
Yeah.
in the creative. Like it's kind of a joke, but it's also true in a sense, because they were like, "Oh, I don't have to worry that I have to get into my savings or whether to support their like artistic or creative dream when I don't even like that idea to start with." So it's I
Exactly.
think, yeah. Go
I
on.
was just gonna say. I mean, like, I think I think the really beautiful thing about our culture is just that family is so highly valued, right? And of course, I recognize that I come from a privileged background in the sense that, like, I have a family who, um, they were immigrants. They did bring, they did buy their first house here and stuff like that. But I have like savings to fall back on. I have parents that still love me. I have a home to come live in if I need to, and I know for a fact if I were to ask for it, my parents would no question, help me out in terms of finances and housing and all that stuff. But at the same time, like I feel like I'm winning a little bit with them by not asking them for that stuff.
For sure. And going back, you mentioned a little bit about how like your overall kind of like, you know networking and getting those connections, is a lot of it is non-monetary, or like things that you get in terms of connection might not lead to
Mm-hmm.
result until like 10, 15 years later, or however
Mm-hmm.
time frame. That's kind of direct opposite to what your I guess your normal traditional
Mm-hmm.
expectation was with your engineering job, where under good circumstances, if you work a year and then you do well, you get performance bonuses, or salary increase, and that will happen naturally every single year till
Mm-hmm.
you stop working, right? So how do you
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
mitigate between those two kind of like differences? Because I think the first one is where,
Mm-hmm.
no, if you do it, you appreciate it, because you getting
Mm-hmm.
value every single year more value as you keep working and you do well and stuff. But for like what you're doing now is a lot of like you mentioned, like you don't see the result until like way later, and even then you might not feel like the value is technically there until the very end when everything's said and done. So have
Right.
you thought much about that aspect, or just how to deal with having to wait for the result to come in way later
Yeah.
than when initially the efforts you put in?
Yeah. I mean, in short, you gotta love it. Like you have to, if you're gonna go on a business venture, if you're gonna go chase a passion and try and make it a career, you really, really do have to love what you do. Because I don't want to paint this picture that like starting a business or pursuing a creative career is all sunshine and rainbows. Like the reality of it, especially these first few years, is exactly the crap that we talked about. It's you're making next to nothing. You're putting in, like right now I'm putting in 50 to 70 hour weeks. My videos, like especially at the very, very beginning, like we're getting 100 views, and like even that number was like a lucky number to hit. It's you truly have to have a passion for what you're doing. You have to have an unwavering belief in the direction that you're headed and the mission that you're trying to fulfill, and that has to be your driver. So, I mean, I say 50 to 70 hour weeks, and some people will ask me, like some close friends of mine, and be like, dang, that's a lot of time. Like, do you get burnt out? And I tell them, like, no, not really. Because when you love what you do, like, you truly don't mind putting in those hours. And especially when you're building a business or you're creating something that's for yourself, like this, nobody cares about it as much as you do. And that's why you don't mind putting in those hours. And so to answer your question, it's you gotta truly, truly have a passion for what you do. You have to truly love what it is that you're getting into, and pair that with consistency and just keeping at it for years and years. And at least I'm not there yet, but because I just launched a few months ago, but the advice that I've been given from friends and mentors is that if you just keep with that belief and that consistency, eventually you will take off.
So you're talking about passion. You need to
Mm-hmm.
keep consistent and doing it as a business venture. How has it been being a business owner to your own business, revolving around being a creative, doing stuff for the arts, for music? How has that journey been?
Yeah, yeah. I think one scenario I'll play out in my head is like, dang, if I ever have to go back into an interview and people asking me about this like gap that I'm taking to start a business, how do I explain it? And I think about if an interviewer to approach it or approach that part of my resume as like a detriment or like a bad thing. And I think that's the furthest thing from the truth, because I have like personally gained so much just out of the few months that I've been doing this. Because when you're a business owner, you have to wear every hat. I have a hand in like the legal side of things. Like I've had to write a terms of service. I've had to write a privacy policy. I recently started bringing on teammates. And so independent contractor agreements, non-disclosure agreements. So you learn about the legal side of things. We just mentioned team, right? You learn about how to work with the team, about how to manage a team, how to let go of certain hats that you wear because other people can do them better. So for example, like video editing or
So we were talking about how like this journey of like being a business owner, being your own boss, doing all the stuff from legal to HR to actual doing the work, or producing content for your company and stuff. Can you just talk about like the biggest things that you have learned so far beyond just yeah, it's a lot of work and it's everything on your own?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now it's starting to come back to me. So basically the biggest things that I've learned so far is to how to wear each of those hats, right? Eventually you're going to outsource those things. And when you're running a business, and one thing I'm doing explicitly, right? Like I do have like a front facing business, right? But if you're trying to be an artist, or your business is you, the same principles apply, but you have to have an understanding of how each of those pieces work at the very least before you outsource them. And eventually you'll have to, because to answer your question, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is the fact that like you will probably love doing one thing or just a handful of things, which is the main reason why you got into it. But having an understanding at the very least of those other things is really, really crucial, because if you've done it before, then you'll be able to hire people and help people understand your vision in terms of those different things. So like an example is like video editing, for example. Right now I'm still doing all of my editing, but if and when it comes time for me to hire an editor, since I've done it before, I'll have an easier time explaining to that person how I like videos edited. And then the same thing applies for, every corner of the business, the legal, the HR, the content creation, all of that stuff.
That's a lot of work and a lot of hats, and hats off to you because creating this podcast, it's not a business yet, it's still a hobby, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel a lot of like no commitment to doing everything on my own, and it takes a lot of work. And now for you it's a whole business where you're hiring people as well, you're doing all the stuff that you can do personally so that can keep the business going, and having to do all those stuff but still create art, create music, and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which is your main passion anyways. So how do you find the balance between like the creativity part, or like the art part, versus like the commerce, the like management, the logistic of that? Because I think for you, like obviously you have it and you're in background and
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of like thought process very analytical, but at the same time you're still very creative. How do you kind of manage both, kind of in a sense where you don't have to compromise on either or to make it
Yeah,
successful?
that's a great question. And I think it, artists or business owners will know exactly what I'm talking about when I'm going to say this, but it's so funny and kind of sad that there's such little time actually spent practicing your instrument now or creating music for yourself. And that's just kind of the reality of it, at least at the beginning. Like, so much of my time is taken up by things that aren't practicing my instrument or making music. Uh, that I don't know, it just pulls you. It's just a reality. I don't think I really have like a piece of wisdom to attach with that. But it is the reality, and it's a hard balance to strike. Right now, I mean, like I get to maybe touch my guitar and play it maybe once every 2 to 4 weeks. It's also kind of a product of the realm that I'm in. So I'm in audio post production, right? So my creativity comes out in a way whenever I'm working on like a music project, right? So I'm still finding ways to express my creativity and my, you know, art through other people's projects. But I mean, from the artist's standpoint of it, like your time is just taken up so much by doing other things that aren't practicing your instrument, like making TikToks, for example. Like you've got to stay relevant on social media in order to get more views and more attention, which ultimately leads to concert sales and song streams and stuff like that. But it's just kind of a sad reality of it that you have to spend so much of your day doing that and not actually creating the art itself. And so definitely, if there's any piece of advice to share there, definitely of course place priority on the things that you have to, but I guess take solace in the fact that other people are also, putting aside their actual work itself to make time for, other more important things in terms of like marketing or what have you.
Yeah, that's a really tough thing to have to admit that it's happening, and also you just have to deal with it because in order for you to be able to do like the passions, you have to take care of other things as well. Being a business owner, especially revolving around that passion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So, with that being said, in your kind of like experience being a business owner now in the few months already,
mm-hmm.
have there been kind of situations or experience that you have encountered where the kind of the creative side and also the business side kind of conflict, or you have to make a compromise for one or the other? Is there experiences like that yet?
Um, Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of more of the same that I had just mentioned. It's like you every day you kind of have to make a decision of, all right, what are the things I'm going to try and get done today? And more often than not, I'm finding like it's the same way. It's kind of like a subconscious thing, right? So people say that what you care about most is a direct, or rather, let me flip it. How you spend your time is a direct reflection of what you care about most, or what is the highest priority to you. So I mean, like, you and I are making time for this podcast, right? So this is obviously something that's important to both of us. Or like, if I'm going to make time to go see my parents and have dinner with them, right, that's something that's important to me. In the same way, whenever I set up my to-do list at the top of each day, like, subconscious, I mean, it really is like, even on a subconscious level, like, you writing those things down, it's like, this is the stuff that matters, right? And so, yeah, compromises have to be made every single day. And unfortunately, like, creating my own music happens to be at this moment, like, at the very bottom of that. But where I see this business going, and, I hope to be at this point in just a couple of years, is being able to outsource all of things like, I mean, even when it comes to like content creation, like coming up with ideas, like, I want to get to the point where I can just film it and then that's all I have to do, and pass it along. Because eventually, as you start to unload more and more things from your plate and learn how to leverage a team, then you can find more time for the original reason why you started all of this, is to create art and to be creative and create something beautiful, right? So you make choices every day, but it's kind of the reality of the business.
So something just popped up. Is like, oh, you embarking on this kind of career as a business owner, doing it for producing art, music,
Mm-hmm.
and your passion. Have you ever thought about doing things as a business owner outside of these, or you're just like, I'm only doing like being a business owner because of art and of passion, or are you kind of the type to be like, I'm business minded regardless, so I would do anything business related, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
not art and music? Because I wonder, because a lot of times now it's like we gotta have different side hustles, so we gotta be a business owner. So are we
Right.
gonna do everything and all the things, even though it might not be your passion? But
That
for you,
yeah.
what would it be considered as?
That makes sense. Yeah, because I think another way to phrase your question is my fervor for entrepreneurship, or is it for music and audio? And right now, at least at this moment in my life, it's definitely for music and audio. The business is basically just a vehicle for me to be able to do what I do. People ask me like, what is your end goal with this? And quite frankly, I mean, maybe I'm not dreaming big enough, but I just want to make a living from this. I would love to be able to say that at the end of the day, like, I could wake up every single day and have a stable career doing what I love. That is the end goal for me. But I mean, I've tossed around the idea in my head of like potentially having like another business venture, but every time I think that way, I'm like, you know what, like, Ravi, focus on the thing that you're working on right now. Like, you need to, there's so much you still have to learn about the space that you're currently in. And so, I mean, I still got a lot of years. So I don't know. I don't know what direction it'll take me. But to answer your question, right now in this moment, the fervor is for finding a way to do music and audio professionally, and not on like a big passion for entrepreneurship.
That's awesome. But what you just mentioned, like you have another business venture idea. What can you share what it is, or it's super secret? You
It's
just can't reveal it
it's
yet.
not even that. It's just, it's so infant. These are like undeveloped ideas. I mean, I'm just observing spaces like, Web3 and NFTs, and I'm trying to, because like the reality of what I'm doing is that it's nothing new. Like, the core tenet of creating any business is finding a need and solving it, right? And the need that I'm trying to solve right now is something that has like been happening for decades. Like, mix engineering and audio post production is a need that it's not new, right? It's not. I'm not trying to find, like, there's no new need that I'm trying to break into in the market. I'm just basically, in a way, I'm like almost finding like a little bit of a niche in the South Asian space, which is potentially like a need that needs to be filled, right? The crossover of South Asians and music and audio. But to answer your question in terms of potential future business ventures, like, I'm just looking for kind of gaps in the music industry, things, or even in the audio and the audio post production spaces, like, where are places that there's a need that I could fill with my skill set. And so, I mean, ideas are really, really infant. I'm more in the learning phase than anything. But I don't know, potentially something might come out of that. Like, and relating it back to the value of starting your own thing and being a business owner is like I'm thinking about things in different ways because I've had this experience of starting a business. So like if I had not gone through this whole process of learning the legal stuff, learning the HR stuff, learning the innovation stuff, the consulting side of things, all the parts of the business that aren't music and audio, I wouldn't be thinking in these ways about the industry. And so, to that respect, it's definitely a benefit.
That's awesome. And another thing that popped up is like you mentioned, like, oh yeah, you do like enjoying, you do enjoy playing instruments. You
Mm-hmm,
were
mm-hmm,
playing the French horn for 9 years. You pick up the guitar and you dabbled in piano as well.
mm-hmm.
So a lot of it is like front facing and like performing and
Yeah.
whatnot. And now you're doing a lot of the post stuff, that
Mm-hmm.
behind the scenes stuff. Do you ever think of like actually moving forward back into the front and be like performing more than you actually doing post related stuff? Or
Yeah,
it's kind of
yeah.
where
That's
mhm.
so that's a really beautiful thing because I have like I filled up 3 entire notes files. I literally hit the bottom of the notes page, like the maximum character allowed amount of musical ideas that I want to pursue. Like I have a very grandiose idea. I'll just this is probably a little bit more secret. I want to keep it a secret until it's time to release it, but I'm gonna call it basically my Desi Symphony. Desi being, South Asian, right? Um, and I've always had like a big passion for bands like AJR, like ones that basically take modern elements like electronic and pop and hip hop, and they fuse them with almost like traditional orchestral instruments. So like violins and strings and marching band instruments. Like there's that band geek in me coming out, right? I have an idea to release original music and to get back into the performing side of things, and I have ideas for like music videos that I want to film and songs that I want to produce and put out into the world. But it's so funny that you asked that right after the question about balancing the business side with the creative side of things, because that's like ultimately that's what the reality of it is. Just like I have 3 pages of ideas that I just need to turn into actual sound and music and like execute on that vision. But right now, just the I think the principal thing on my mind is just getting back to stability because as we mentioned at the beginning, like everything's like I'm funding myself right now entirely through savings, and that does, have a time limit on it, right? And so I think once I start to hit the point where there's sustainable revenue generation coming from the business, then I'll probably allow myself to lean back into the art more. And perhaps I'm rambling a little bit, but I think it also one thing that I also thought of is just the perception of time, in the sense that like people often think that, especially in today's world, that they have to like finish everything or they're behind on their time relative to their peers. But that's truly not the reality of it. I mean, I'm 25 right now, and I still like, if you literally go by like the federal retirement age, which I think is like 59 and a half before you can even withdraw from your retirement accounts. I mean, 59 and a half minus 25, right? You've got literally over 30 years to build a career. So, I think there will be a time to eventually get back into the creative side of things and back to the performance side of things. But I'm just like trying to focus on the business stuff today. But it's like, like I said, the creative stuff is there.
For sure. And I look forward to like getting to hear that and like see you do that, because I think that will be very beautiful, and it makes so much sense because that's what your true passion is,
Mm-hmm.
and you're able to do it. That's great. And I forgot to ask this earlier, but like you mentioned, like, oh yeah, you worked a traditional, stable job before
Mm-hmm.
you approach this kind of like business venture, and also funding it yourself through savings. So when you did decide to make that leap, was it purely based on like, oh, I accumulate a certain amount of saving, or was there
Mm.
other kind of consideration factor in that be like, I need to do it now rather than later? Because realistically, with saving, you can always say like, I need to accumulate more and more savings, so it may
Mm-hmm.
take longer, and that's fine. So what was it that made you be like, oh, I have this already, I
Mm-hmm.
need to jump into pursuing what I want to pursue?
Yeah, yeah. This is a great question, and when people ask me, "Do you have any tips for starting a business?" This is usually what I share with them. Um, I realized pretty quickly. I'd say probably maybe a year and a half into working my full time like energy job that I didn't want to do it, and if it were up to my emotions, I would have quit that day. But that being said, like passion is amazing, but passion with a plan helps you succeed. And so I think there's three pieces to that. There's education, experience, and finances, of course. So on the education front, definitely not every single situation calls for it, but in my scenario, I felt like I was missing a lot of the technical audio background, and I wanted to learn that stuff. Like I had a genuine interest in that. And so I started an online degree with the Berklee College of Music in 2019. So this is a year into me working my day job, and it's still going. Like I'm just doing it part-time on the side to get the technical knowledge, but I've got education going. The other piece was experience. So I was looking for, like, I filled my evenings and my weekends with trying to find freelance work, whether it was for free or, paid gigs or whatever. I was just trying to get my name out there and just trying to get some actual experience working on other people's projects before I quit my job. And then the last piece of it is finances. If there's anything you take away from the spiel, it's that savings equals time. The more you have in savings, the longer you'll have to go without having to worry about food on the table or a roof over your head, which will give you time to focus on your business and building your venture and stuff like that. And so, there wasn't, to answer your question, there wasn't a single number that I was trying to hit. But I just knew that if the longer that I continued my day job, the more savings I would have whenever it did come time to quit. And, for me, that number ended up being 3 years. I felt like 3 years was a good amount of time to, if I were to ever have the need to come back to the energy industry, 3 years of time, 3 years of experience under your belt is a good amount to have. And it also allowed me a good enough time to build up savings and those other two pieces, like some education, some experience, some portfolio before I actually decided to quit. And then I think the last piece of advice within there is the fact that eventually you do need to decide. It took me, I remember this experience very vividly. I had a friend come over and I just gave her my spiel of oh man, I'm so stressed. I don't really like this job. I'm waking up every single day and I don't love what I do. And she's like, you know what, Ravi, your 3-year anniversary is coming up. Make me a pinky promise that you're going to quit on your 3-year anniversary. And I was like, really? And she's like, do it. You got to do it. And I was like, you know what? Fine. So I made that pinky promise and I quit on my 3-year anniversary. So I worked 3 years to the day for that company. But yeah, passion with a plan. Passion with a plan.
That's awesome, and I think that's great advice for those that want to make that leap, that want to try something new that they really like and passionate about. And
Mm-hmm.
we talk a lot about your experience, going from a traditional career to now being a business owner. A lot of stuff revolving around following your passion, doing what you like,
Mm-hmm.
the arts, the music, and we're going towards the end of our conversation. This has been really great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I just want to hear from you because of your expertise in kind of post production, all that audio specific type
Mm-hmm.
things. I want to hear what your kind of perception or what's your idea of good audio for music, for podcasts, for all those stuff. What's to you would be
Mm-hmm.
good audio? Because I think for just a regular person that's not really intense into it, a good audio is I can hear it, it's clear and all that stuff. But there's
Uh-huh.
deeper than that. Can you just kind of explain it in how you feel good audio is for you?
Yeah. So I'm definitely if I get too into it, I'm definitely gonna upset some people because it's a subjective industry, of course, right? What sounds good to one person might not sound good to the next person, and obviously, my ears are trained in a different way, in terms of listening to music. It's funny because even when I listen to music on Spotify, I can either flip a certain switch on and try and listen critically and be like, okay, this is panned in this direction, this instrument is pushed, way back in the mix. Or I could just flip that switch off and let me just listen for the sake of listening. So that being said, what makes good audio? The real answer is if you think it sounds good. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much technical crap I go into. It doesn't matter how this is EQ'd or this is panned or this or that. What matters at the end of the day is how the end listener thinks it sounds. So, I mean, I could spend 20 hours on a 1-minute song and just pour all of my technical expertise into it. But somebody else could pour 5 hours into that same song, make a couple of different adjustments, and it sounds better to the end listener. So it's not about the technical stuff 100%. It's just at the end of the day, does it sound good? One other story that I kind of wanted to share, kind of in that vein, was like, when it comes to the creative side of things, people, people wonder, like, what do you do in audio post production? Like, what do you do to my song or my podcast or whatever? Whenever I hand it to you, right? And so I'll take the example of a song. I think songs have the reason we listen to songs is to feel something, right? It's all about translating the emotion of the artist or the songwriter and having the listener feel something. Same thing with a podcast, right? I mean, you're trying to have somebody tell a story and then feel something, right? And so let's take an example of a sad song, right? What I might do is my job to basically set the different volume levels of the different instruments inside of them. In a stereo field, you're obviously listening through like a left channel and a right channel, right? And so I can place things to make them sound like they're coming straight from your left ear, straight from your right ear, or somewhere in that field in between. So technically, let's say we've got a sad song or like an intimate song. What I can do is keep more of the low frequencies in, kind of like Billie Eilish does in her music, to make it feel like she's like whispering in your ear. You know what I mean? Like she's really just there telling you something face to face. And there's a technical way to translate it so that it sounds like that. Or if she's really trying to get into the story of a song, I'll push the instrumentation to the back and bring the vocals out to the front, right? So that the story really comes out, the intimate sharing of that emotion just comes out. And so that's just kind of a flavor of it, right? Like, these are the choices you make in post-production, and your goal at the end of the day is to basically enhance the emotion, enhance the story being told so that it comes across to the end listener.
That's great kind of advice, or just idea of what means for good audio. And I learned a bit about it. Like, I think, like you really mentioned, you nailed it, as in, like, as long as it sounds good to you, then it's good audio. Because I think at the end of the day, we could all say, like, oh, we could focus a lot on the technical side of everything, but at the end of the day, if the end product is not good, or the feeling isn't doesn't translate well to whoever is like consuming it, that it doesn't matter if all the technical stuff is to the T, to perfect and stuff, then people are not going to care. And I think there's still value to solid post production, because it allows for better experience. So what you're doing is very important, and I think your business, there are so many opportunities, and you're killing it. I see a lot of the work that you've been putting it out in terms of, like, not just like music, but also the podcast that you work on. And it's great that you're having a hand in all those, because I think a lot of the things that you've been working on is focused on, like you mentioned, a lot of the gaps for like South Asian and in music or in audio. And I think that's great, because it adds into an element of, like, you supporting the community that you really appreciate and a part of. And that's important as we go focus on building solidarity amongst everyone that we care for. And I love the work you're doing. And perfect. And this is the last question that we have. And thank you so much for offering those great answers and you sharing your experience with us and your story. It's been a blast. And for those who want to find out more about you, what you do, and seek out your service potentially, where can they find you and hit you up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just mention at the beginning, if you've made it this far, I really appreciate you listening. It means the world. And then to you, Kyle, thank you for featuring me. Like, I know we've had this this podcast feature in the works for a few months now, and so I'm glad that we finally were able to make it happen. But yeah, so if you want to connect in general, if you want to talk about mixing for an audio project, whether it be music, podcast, film, television, any of that stuff, or literally even if you just have questions, because I genuinely just get a kick out of talking about this stuff, I'm always happy to talk audio. I'm on all social platforms at It's Ravi Ray. So it's ITSRAVIRAY. And then my website is ravirayaudio.com, and that has a bunch of before after samples. It has my full portfolio, team members, FAQ, all that type of good stuff. So yeah, hit me up there.
Awesome. And hopefully people check him out and check you out and all that fun stuff. And I hope nothing but the best for you and all that you do, and can't wait to see you grow and grow more in terms of yourself and also your business. And on this note, thank you for listening, and join us next time for another episode of What Kind of Asian Are You podcast. Bye bye.
Beautiful. Thanks, Kyle. See y'all.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and share the podcast on your social media, and rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can find us by just searching What Kind of Asian Are You podcast on Google and at What Kind of Asian Pod on Instagram. For the YouTube listeners, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and ring the notification bell. Last but not least, buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/whatkindofasian. Thank you again, and make sure to tune in next time for another awesome episode.